Section 242, 117, Vision and Hearing Acuity. The section contains the requirement of the visual hearing, the acuity testing that road must incorporate it in its conductor certification program. The best visual requirements are the same that are provided in Title 49 CFR 240-121, although the testing procedure standard and hearing requirements are more stringent, and those contained in the Title 49 240-121 were derived from the procedure standards provided in Title 49 CFR Part 227. The criteria must be met as the hearing testing identical to the criteria in Part 240. The paragraph F is intended to address, among the other things, situation in which the conductor certificate states that he or she is required to use the corrective directive as such as glasses. The conductor undergoes the corrective protective, such as laser eye surgery, which eliminates the need for the corrective device. If the conductor wants to serve as a conductor without using the corrective device listed on the card, then the following corrective procedure, he or she would obtain a written determination of the railroad medical examiner the conductor safely performed without using the corrective device. In addition, the certificate should be updated to reflect the conductor is no longer required to use the corrective device while serving as a conductor. Although some individuals may not be able to meet the threshold acuity levels in this rule, they may be able to compensate in other ways that will permit in them to function at appropriate safety level. Dispute their physical limitations. Paragraph J of this section permits the railroad's procedure whereby the doctors can evaluate such individuals and make discrete determinations about each personal ability to compensate for his or her physical limitations. If the railroad medical examiner concluded that the individual compensated for his or her limitations could be safely serve as a conductor as of the railroad can certify that the person under this regulation, once the railroad possesses the medical examiner professional medical opinion to the effect. Paragraph C K of the section addresses the issue of, however, soon after the deterioration of his or her best correctable vision of hearing, certified conductor would have been notified of the railroad deterioration. If the FRA is concerned with the safe performance for the conductor's service, not with whether the person can notify a railroad within a set of time frame, and the paragraph K requires notification prior to any subsequent performance as a conductor. Certified conductors should note that the willful noncompliance with the requirement could result in enforcement of the action. As mentioned above, in the possible that the regulation of medical standard working group adopted by the FRA could contain requirements that supersede hearing and the vision standards requirement in this rule. Section 242-119 Training. This section complies with the training requirement of the RSIA. Requires the railroad to provide initial periodic training for the conductor. The training is necessary to ensure the conductor has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to completely safely perform all safety-related duties mandated by the federal law, regulations, or the paragraph of this section requires the railroads document the conductor's knowledge of the ability to comply with the federal railroad safety laws and regulations, railroad rules used to implement them. In addition, with the paragraph requires the railroad to document the conductor demonstrated that he or she is qualified on the physical characteristics of the railroad and pertinent segments of the other person that will perform the service. Of the section also requires the railroad to review and modify their training program whenever the newly safety-related railroad laws, regulations, technology, procedures, equipments are introduced into the workplace. Under this section, railroads have the latitude in design and developing training and developing methods that will employ the paragraph D, E, and F and provided requirements for the railroad to elect the train as previously untrained person to be a conductor. Pursuant to the paragraph D, the railroad makes the election would be required to determine how this paragraph must be structured and developed in delivering and including an appropriate combination of classroom simulator, computer-based correspondence on the job, and training and other formal training. Paragraph G, H, and I, J, and K of this section contain the requirements with respecting requiring familiarity with the physical characteristics of the territory, except for the requirements in paragraph JK and the requirements parallel to those in paragraph 240 JK of this section requires railroads to designate them in their programs for the time period of which the conductor must be absent from the territory of the yard before the requalification of physical characteristics is required for the procedure used to qualify qualifying a person on the physical characteristics. Paragraph L requires each railroad to provide a containing education certificate of certified conductors to ensure each conductor maintains the necessary knowledge concerning railroad safety operating rules, compliance with the applicable federal regulations, including but not limited to hazardous materials, passenger training, emergency preparedness, brake system safety standards, pre-departure inspection procedures, passenger equipment safety standards, physical characteristics, characteristics of territory. This paragraph is derived in Title 49 CFR 240-123. As mentioned in above, it is possible for the regulation recommended by the training standards of the Players Working Group as adopted for the FRA may include the indifferent additional training requirements that those found in this rule to the extent possible to the appropriate FRA conform with the training of the requirements of this rule. Recommendations developed in training standards and planning of the work group. However, the FRA does not know at this time what the final training regulations will provide. Therefore, some of the modifications of the training requirements in this rule may be necessary to conform the final requirements of any of the training regulations. 242-121 Knowledge Testing. This section derived in Title 49 CFR 240-125, 242-09 requires the railroads to provide initial periodic testing of the testing of the conductors. The testing will have the effectively examine measure of the conductor knowledge of the 5 basic areas: safety, operating rules, and table instruction, compliance with the applicable federal regulations, physical characteristics of the territory on which will be and is currently serving as conductor, and the use of the job aid on the railroad may be provided by the conductor. Under this section, railroad has its discretion designed for the test and will be employed for the man of the railroad for the entailing some modification of the existing book of the rules examination to include the new subject areas. The section does not specify the things of the numbers of questions to be asked and passing the score to be obtained. However, this does not require that the test be conducted within open reference book. But unless the use of such material is part of the test objective, the test must be written in electric form. Interested parties should note that the railroad may not. The test may be written in written or electric form. The interested party should note that the railroad may not give any open book exam. Some of the portion of the test must be closed, since the testing effort selected by the railroad must be submitted by the FRA for the approval. The exercise of the discretion being afforded by the railroads by this section will be monitored by the FRA. To address the concern of some of the members of the working group if the person be tested were unable to be obtained clarification of the test questions by someone possess knowledge of the relevant territory. Paragraph E of the subsection requires to provide the person with being tested with the opportunity to consult with a supervisor employee who possesses territorial qualification for the territory to explain the question. 242 123 Monitoring Operational Performance. Section derived in Title 49 CFR 241 129 and 24303 contains the requirements for conducting an announced compliance test. Paragraph B of this section requires each of the railroads to have a program to monitor the conductor of the conduct of the conductors performing an unannounced operating rule compliant with the test. The paragraph is provided with the procedure addressing the test and certified with the conductor is not performing a service that requires the certification under this part. The FRA understands that the railroad may not be able to provide those conductors with the annual unannounced compliance test. Unlike Part 240, which requires the railroad to seek the waiver from the FRA safety boards from the engineers, they are unable to annually test. This paragraph does not require railroads to give announced compliance tests to the conductor who are not performing servicing or requiring certification. Moreover, the railroads are given approximately a month to test the conductors returning to the service. Paragraph C provides that each of the conductor must be given at least one unannounced compliance test each calendar year by a railroad officer who meets the requirements of Title 49 CFR 217B1. Paragraph D provides the operational test of the conductor passenger must be tested. The paragraph also passenger conductors who do not require compliance with Title 49 CFR 218 subpart F, except for under emergency circumstances to meet the annual unannounced testing requirement. The annual training interested party should note that the paragraph has been revised by the notice of provision of rule making to clarify the annual treatment exemption in paragraph D2 1 and only applies to part 218 subpart F. That railroad will have the test on 217 statutes 217.9. Paragraph E of this section requires the railroad to indicate the types of actions which will take the event of the deficiency of the conductor performance during the unannounced compliance test. If railroad believes it is up to each of the railroads to decide appropriate action to take the light of the various factors, including collective bargaining agreements. Further, the FRA believes that the various majority of the railroads have adequate policies to deal with deficiency conductor performance that have handled from appropriate from many years. To avoid restriction from the option available for the railroad employees, the representative developed a process for handling test failures. The FRA designated regulation to be flexible as possible. There are variety of actions and approaches the railroad could take in response to test failure. The FRA does not want to stifle a railroad's ability to adopt the approach in the best organization. Some of the actions the railroad considered include developing and provided formal remedial training for the conductor who fails to test and deficiency in their performance automatically download event record data upon the test failure of deficiency performance in order to preserve evidence of failure deficiency required to sue supervisors and accompanying tests. Each railroad could also consider implementation of formal procedures whereby a conductor is given an opportunity to explain in writing with the fact that he or she believes the cause of the test of the failure of the performance deficiency. Explanation may allow the railroad to determine where areas of the training to be focused on, perhaps discover the reason for the failure and deficiency was due to something other than the lack of skills failure. FRA believes the numerous other approaches that could also be should and considered be evaluated by the railroad and their employees. The FRA realizes the railroad list of the actions will take response for the test of the failure deficiency performance could be expensive given for the various circumstances that could be contributed to the test of the failure deficiency performance. Paragraph B and F of this section recognize some of the certified conductors may not be performing the service that requires the conductor certification, thus the railroad may not be able to provide these conductors with the annual unannounced compliance test. For example, a certified conductor may not be for long in a military service off with an extended illness working in the other service. Unlike Part 240, which requires the railroad to seek a waiver for the FRA Safety Board of the engineers to unable to annually test, this section does not require the railroad to give an unannounced compliance test to the conductors who are not performing service requiring certification. However, when the certified conductor returns to the conductor service, he or she will have tested within 30 days of the return. Moreover, the railroad will have to retain the written record of documentation certain dates regarding the conductor's service. Section 242-125 certification determinations made by the other railroads. The section derived in Title 49 CFR 240-225 provides the requirements that are all applied with certified previously by conductors about to begin with the service for the different railroads. The section permits the hiring railroad to rely on the determinations made by the other railroad concerning the person's certification. However, the section requires the railroad certification program to address how the railroad will administrate the training of the previously uncertified conductors. Extensive operating experience and previously certified conductors who have their certification expired. In both these instances, the FRA is providing with the railroad for the opportunity to shorten the on-the-job training that might be required for the best if the person is treating as having no operational experience. If the railroad certification program fails to specify that have no training of personal certified engineering hired with another railroad, then the railroad must require the newly hired conductor to take a hiring railroad's entire training program. If the railroad certification program fails to specify how the trained person, previously certified engineer hired from another railroad, then the railroad must require the newly hired conductor to take a hiring railroad entire training program. Section 242-127, reliance of the qualification requirements of the other countries. Section derived in Title 249 CFR 242-227 provides Canadian railroads that operate in the United States. U.S. railroads to conduct joint operations with the Canadian railroads to option rely on the system of the conduct and certification established by the Canadian government as long as the conductor is employed by the Canadian railroad. Subpart C, administration of the certification program.